Love, love, until I feel that breath of thy spirit flowing in me.
Hello, welcome to Spirit of Life. My name is Geraldine Lee, your host, and our guest is Clare Burns. She is a communications officer. Welcome, Clare.
Thank you for having me, Geraldine.
So could you share us about your, profession?
Sure. At the moment, I'm the Principal Communications Officer for Far North Queensland, so that's up near Cairns, between Cardwell and Thursday Island, near the really last tip of Australia. It's a beautiful area. There's about 100 schools, and there's also a lot of training organisations. So working for the Department of Education, Training and Employment, I get to have a lot of good times going around. I've visited about 50 schools in the region, which are really different. Some of our schools have 100% Indigenous, they're fully Indigenous communities. Some of our schools, it's mostly Anglo, but mostly there's a bit of a mix. About 30% of our students are Indigenous, and the area is the size of Victoria, so it's really vast.
Wow.
So often I have to pinch myself whether or not I'm going for these long journeys past this beautiful countryside.
Drive or you go by plane?
Fly, and that's just the reality of it being in a land that large, and just the distance and the differences that go on between one school and another school.
Yeah, and what do you communicate between the schools? I suppose being a communication officer, I suppose.
Sure. Yeah, it's multitasked.
Really?
There is an element of getting good news stories out there. When I first started, some people said, no, media aren't interested in any good news stories. But you kind of like scratch beneath the surface and there's some really fabulous stories. There's some really great initiatives going on out there. And if you just find the right angle, people are kind of like, in the secular, they are interested in good stories because it does. It touches the heart. People genuinely, most of the time, they do want to see people doing well and coming out of areas of darkness into light. So that's an element. Sometimes it's also trying to keep not so good stories out of the media. And a lot of it is also going around to the different schools and just getting them to think about, what do we stand for as our school? What sets us apart? What's the makeup of our students? What's the makeup of our parents as well? Certainly in a really remote area where it's 100% Indigenous, giving them a whole lot of written communication and trying to get stories into kind of like the central newspapers, they're not going to be reading those. Some of them may or may not be listening to radio, so you try and get some stories onto radio. But at the moment, a lot of them are using Facebook, so that's where you go to. But that's really quite different from the schools around Cairns. So I really enjoy that element, and also just looking at internal leadership. How do we describe what we stand for and what we do? And years ago, probably about 8 or 10 years ago, I used to do that in some private schools, in some Catholic schools, and they probably understood the concept of ethos a little bit better. They might not necessarily be doing it, but they understood that concept. Whereas, say, for more of the state system, it's a little bit more of a stretch. You're taking people on a journey to have that identity.
So it's so are you promoting the schools through the media, or is it communicating between the schools, or
there's an element that is internal communications, where we are, okay, what's going on, what's the message internally that they need. And that's really important, those internal messages. And even just for one school, okay, as a principal or as a leadership team, how do we communicate our messages to the people? And some of our schools are really big. There might be 1,700 students, which means there's a big body. So getting that consistent messaging out there is really important, just even in one school. So that's internal communication. But there is also that external communication, whether it be with the immediate parents and caregivers, or more broadly as well too. Because we want everybody in the community to be supporting young people for the best outcomes. So I really enjoy elements of that, whether or not it's looking at how the messages are communicated via website, newsletter, verbally.
And how do you find your faith applies in this area? How do you feel that you can, be a witness to your faith in? It's a secularism school, it's a secular school.
Yeah. To be honest, pretty much all of my professional jobs haven't been with Christian organisations. I've done loads of volunteer works outside of that, and also not being paid for that, but that's really okay. But to say most of my professional work, it hasn't been with Christian organisations. I guess it's looking for the good. What is the good in this? And I can't take credit for this quote. Another wise woman said, but people may not necessarily be reading the Bible, but they will be reading you.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's to say what your behaviour is. If your behaviour is kind of like all flighty, today I'm nice, tomorrow I'm really grumpy, kind of like people are going to see that. Consistency in behaviour, I think, is really important. And also, I don't go around telling people that I'm a Christian or that I'm a Catholic. They might start picking it up because I'll ask, what do you do on the weekends? And I might say, well, I did Rosie's Friends on the Street, and that's working with homeless people. Yes, we give food and clothing, but it's more about the conversation, and I'll talk about how much I really enjoy just sitting with people who are homeless and just the authenticity and what they give me. And so sometimes they do pick up, oh, I think Claire. And after that, it does. There are higher expectations, whether they're verbalised or not, but that shouldn't be my motivation. And to be honest, I don't think about it that much. It's just, how can I listen to what God's calling me to do at the moment? But also being faithful. Okay, I'm employed by this organisation. I choose to work for an organisation that's generally doing good. Otherwise, I wouldn't work for them. And I have made some pretty big calls. I studied public relations. I've studied marketing. I've also done workplace training and taught in TAFEs and other places. But a few times I have had to decide, no, actually, I can't take on this job because it doesn't sit right. The end goal isn't something that I agree with. So I really, really enjoy working in the education sector when there are so many good stories that I think God would be really happy about.
Yes. No, it's really interesting about your faith in your work. On that note, we're going to go for a break now. You're watching Spirit of Life. We're going to take a break now. Stay with us. Hello, welcome back to Spirit of Life. I'm Geraldine Lee, your host, and our guest is Clare Burns. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Claire. You've been sharing about your faith in work, and you were also talking about volunteer work. Could you tell us more about your volunteer work and how your faith applies? Yeah,
well, I was really fortunate growing up. I'm one of 10 children, and my mother and father, not that they would have called it as such, but they did have a bit of a social justice bent. So sometimes Christmas days would go to a place called Osram House, a bit of a homeless men's shelter, and lots of other good things happen there too. But from a young age, we were doing things like working with Vinnies, doing bread run, and other things. And I didn't know that was volunteer work. And as an 11-year-old, I was coaching under 10s netball, and there were lots of little things like that. And it probably wasn't until I was 22, 23, working for a health promotions organisation, and we were kind of like effectively espousing the benefits of volunteering and how that benefits health. And quite a few of the people coming up to me and they said, Claire, we want you to talk about your volunteering or all the different sorts of stuff of volunteering. I said, what are you talking about? I haven't done that much stuff. They said, this is... I didn't know.
It was just natural.
It was just what you do, and because growing up, it was just kind of like it was just what you do. You see a need, and you go out there and you do it, and with whatever gifts. So I love the opportunities that I've had to volunteer. As I mentioned before, as a young girl, it was as a family we went and visited a homeless men's shelter and did a bit of work with Vinnies. When I was about 16. I decided that I wanted to do volunteer work with people with disabilities. I'm not sure why that was. Maybe it was because I had major brain surgery at 14 and it really kind of like brought home, these are my brothers and sisters. I'm just like them. I'd like to spend some time with them. So I started doing kind of respite work with people with a disability, and I loved it. They gave me so many laughs. They also challenged me, and something that I really like about some of the young people that I was with just their authenticity. They called it as it is, and if I wasn't feeling so great or if I didn't look so good, they would tell me that. But I'm really grateful for those experiences because we had a ball. And that kind of stayed with me. I'd always kind of looked for opportunities to do volunteering. That was kind of like right with my skill set, and also had the right amount of talent or otherwise. So some other volunteering that I ended up doing was teaching people about learning a bit about radio. Obviously, I love sport, so coaching and umpiring netball. When I moved up to Cairns about 2 years ago, I'm from Melbourne, I grew up in Melbourne, but I felt it was the right time to move up to Cairns and into a warmer climate.
Yes. And
I saw just an advertisement in the parish bulletin about Rosie's Friends on the Street. So that was spending time with homeless people and the opportunity to give out food and clothing and occasionally some other things, but more the conversation. That really attracted me. And so did a little bit of training with them, and they said, yeah, no, we'd like you to do that, and became a team leader.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah, and
leadership.
Yeah, and I was, again, really fortunate as well too, when there's good people around you as well too, and I think maybe some of that desire was also brought about when I was around 17, 18. I was in a really good youth group, and one of the things that they did was they did Vinnie's Soup Van, and they went out to high-rise buildings or to parks and things, and to be with good people who had a lot of experience at that age, it kind of like really whet the appetite.
Yes. Did you sense God, in particularly, like for some young people, they particularly feel closer to God when they're doing social justice work? Was that something for you?
It is. I probably wouldn't have articulated it that way, but it was right, that deep kind of like inner peace. This feels right. When I don't have the opportunity to do this, I feel a bit out of balance. And also I focus too much on myself. It's also a bit, I get getting the whole kind of like makeup right. If I'm not doing the right amount of volunteering, or if I'm not tithing or praying, it kind of like it throws it all out.
You feel out of balance, isn't it?
Yeah, it does. By the same token, if I'm doing too much of some of it, then I don't think God wants that either. And it took me a good anyway, it's a journey that I'm still learning, because I do have a few skills in communications and in other areas. And I do get excited about lots of different things, and there's lots of good works. But I found myself starting to burn out with some of it, and I really had to take a step back and see, realistically, where does God want me to be? So therefore, looking at it all, asking God to come into it, okay, can you just prioritise? Where is there life in this? Where do you want me in this?
So it's like a decision-making process you went through.
Yeah, and I need to do that kind of like consistently, because I do get excited.
Opportunities, projects, all those sort of things, and seeing the gap.
Yeah, there is, and there's some fabulous things I've had the opportunity to work on. There's a group called the Anima Women's Network, and helping kind of like set that up in the initial stages. And these are things that I'm really deeply passionate about.
Is there a certain type of spirituality of how you make up your decisions? Do you use a certain, strategy or process?
Whatever's right at the time. But I've done a lot of Ignatian spirituality, which I really get a lot out of. And so Ignatius has a lot of different spiritual exercises, and I'll pray about it. What's the best way to discern this at this particular point in time? And he's got some fabulous things, whether or not it's okay. What advice, if you're speaking to a friend, what advice would you give them? Spending 3 days kind of like weighing up the pros and cons, 3 days for, 3 days against. If I'm on my deathbed, after making whatever is the most kind of like powerful decision in there that rises up the most, how would I feel if I'm on my deathbed after making that particular decision?
So that's some of the process. Very interesting.
Yeah, lots. And also having a spiritual director also helps. The regular prayer life every morning and evening, really assigning times to kind of like, okay, I'm not on track, can you please just show me this, or close the right doors and open the right ones? And I think the closing of doors is just as important as the opening of doors.
Yeah, that's a good point. On that note, we're going to have to take a break now. You're watching Spirit of Life. Stay with us. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Blow till I hear much breath of thy Spirit flowing in me. Blow, blow till I hear much breath of thy Spirit flowing in me.
Hello, welcome back to Spirit of Life. My name is Geraldine Lee, and our guest is Clare Burns. Hi, Clare.
G'day.
Thanks so much for sharing your faith story within your work. And I was wondering if you'd like to focus on some particular experience you had where you really thought, that's God, I can really see God there.
I think I'm fortunate that God works powerfully, kind of like most days. Sometimes
in
it's
your
not.
life.
Sometimes it's, for me, it's not usually kind of like a big thing, kind of like erupting. It's more like the little things.
See Him in your everyday.
In everyday.
Not necessarily the dramatic.
No. And just recently, I mentioned before that I do volunteer work with Rosie's Friends on the Street, and there was a really rainy Thursday evening. I'd just been diagnosed with glandular fever. I was feeling pretty tired, but I just thought, no, I should really go out and kind of like lead the team to go out into the park. And briefly met up with the area coordinator beforehand, and he said, oh, you don't really have to go out, kind of like, you'll be all right, there probably won't be that many people. But I just thought, no, we need to go out. And the numbers were really down, so there was only 3 of us, which is the minimum number we need.
Yeah, that would have been hard if you had the glandular fever.
Yeah. But as it turned out, there was a lady, and it was a single mother. She was crook as well too, but she'd spent all afternoon making these wonderful chicken and rice and other kind of like really, really tasty meals, and packaged them up beautifully. And she had done that for us. And so she dropped that off kind of like when we were there. So if we hadn't have been there, all that work possibly would have been wasted.
Yes.
But then we went to the park. It was pretty rainy, but the people who were there, and the numbers were down a little bit, but the people were there, they were just so open for a conversation. I think the first bloke who kind of came to the van, he just wanted to, he really wanted to share it. Yeah, I've just got out of prison 4 hours ago, and and I'm a bit depressed, and this is going on, and just, oh gee, thanks for that meal. Oh, that's really great. Oh, it's good to know that there's somebody around. That was the first guy. Another guy, just hi, and he was a bit more gentler in his just his demeanour. And I said, yeah, how's it going? How's your week been? And he said, well, how do you think my week's been? I'm a junkie. I said, oh, okay, what does that mean? He said, well, I've had 4 hits this week, and he explained that. And he just wanted to say, I hate it. I hate being a junkie. And he just wanted to talk about that, and to talk about how he arrived there, that he was in a workplace accident. He still looked pretty fit, and he explained that he was a builder. He fell off the roof, was given some prescription drugs, kind of, and then they just kind of like, it kept on escalating from there. But he just wanted people to sit with, and quite a few other guys.
Because you were like being Jesus, being God being God's presence to these people.
God was definitely there in it. It was just almost so tangible. Yeah, and it was just such a real privilege to sit and to listen to these people who just wanted to share their stories. And just so many times thought, do you know what, this could be any of us. Just a wrong decision here or here, and we end up there. And how nice it is to share a story and to have people listen to you, and to be trusted as well. So I was really grateful for all of that, but also for the faithfulness of that woman, kind of like, even though she had lots of things, if she's a single mum of a few children, she's a really busy lady and trying to work on top of that, but she was still giving up her time, and it was so well received. Those meals, I don't think I've seen. Some people who come to the van, they're hungry, but some people who come to the van are really, really hungry. these men that night were really, really hungry. There was another fellow as well too, so I'm excited now. I started telling all these stories.
Oh, it's good. It's great stories.
Yeah, and he just explained how he worked for a well-known bakery in Cairns, change of management. The Cairns has had a bit of a downturn. They had to lay him off because he didn't have the regular income coming in. He lost his accommodation, kind of like being on the street. He was really, really hungry. Again, just like this could be any of us, and what a privilege it is that they will share their stories with me, and also how fortunate I am that then I could give them something on that night.
Concrete, yeah, some food.
Yeah, and how important it is just to be there to listen to God. And sometimes He just asks us to show up, and then He'll work His grace and His providence there in it.
Yes, no, that's fantastic, because I mean they would. Often when people are in pain, they want to share their story. It's a really comforting thing and healing thing. And I know there's a quote by St. Francis you might know about, rather than preach with words, preach with by doing, by presence. That's what you're doing, being Christ to people.
I'll definitely not claim that, but there are some wonderful people that I I'm fortunate enough to volunteer with.
Yes.
And there's some great organisations doing some fabulous work. But any of us could be called to do anything, and it's just really listening, God, where do you want me to be? And also knowing that I can't be everywhere or all the time, or as many places as I'd like to be. Can you just show me where you want me at this particular point in time?
And when you say that prayer, is there a feeling like, I know this is where God wants me to be? How do you tell the difference like that with that feeling? Is it you feel, I know this is where I'm meant to go, to the right or to the left or something? That's the feeling you get, and that gives you your guidance?
Yeah, a little bit, and I explained a little bit more about how I make some decisions, but again, many times during the day, kind of like asking God to just tell me, just show me, or to cut off doors that shouldn't be, that shouldn't be opened.
Yes, there's a degree of trust, isn't there?
Yeah, it is, and also trusting God that what I lack, you can make up.
And now your work sort of is. Do you travel with your work, like in Cairns? Do you also travel interstate? Do you do that?
Not so much interstate, because I work for state government, like the Queensland government. But because where I do work in far north Queensland, it is the size of Victoria. So I do fly a little bit. Sometimes I drive a little bit to some of the really different and remote communities. And to be honest, I'm in awe of some of our students. What's going on in their home life? Sometimes it really is quite traumatic.
Yeah.
And when I first started, one of the principals explained that the particular student who was sitting with him, and that's a really beautiful bookwork, his handwriting and everything like that. It just looked so neat and so ordered. But he explained that particular student, at home, there's about 20, sometimes 28 people living in the home. Sometimes dad's an alcoholic, mum has a few mental health illnesses. There has been somebody who's abused him, and he looks after his younger sister and brother sometimes. And I'm just in awe of some of the students.
And you're doing a great work. And we're coming to the end of our program, but it's been great to have you, and it's been very inspiring, your life. So thank you for coming to Spirit of Life, and God bless you.
Thank you for your time.
Future. You have been watching Spirit of Life. Join us next week. Goodbye, and God bless you.